Our story is set in the late 1700s, and the Aboriginal people in Tasmania are going about their day, living life the same way they have had for the past 59,000 years. The Tasmanian Devil, also known as Taz, is a 20-year-old man who wants to prove himself in battle and eventually become one of the leaders within his mob, but for now, he has to wait.
3 years later.
While Taz is out hunting, Anna, who is the wife of the mob's leader, tells him that strangers with white skin just arrived at their village and the men are getting ready to fight. This is Taz's opportunity to prove himself. Taz rushes back to the village and grabs his spear. He is ready to fight with the other men in his mob. Charlie, who is the leader of the mob, walks over to the soldiers and explains that these white men are their friends. He goes on to explain that they came from England and that they are here to form mutually beneficial relationships with the Aboriginal people. Taz drops his spear and walks away, disappointed that he wasn't able to prove himself in battle.
6 months later.
The British have made themselves at home within the village while George, the commander of the British forces in Tasmania, and his soldiers have abandoned the mutually beneficial agreements with the Aboriginal people. George has decided that he is going to use the Aboriginal people as means for his own personal benefit by looting the villages of every mob that they encounter. Taz is sick of it. He finally musters the courage to go to his parents, Karen and Frank, telling them about his desire to go to war with the British. Karen and Frank explained to Taz that going against Charlie's passive orders would go against the Aboriginal tradition of following the orders of the leader. Taz leaves the conversation with his parents, knowing that from this point forward, he will just have to take matters into his own hands. Taz spends the next couple of weeks trying to develop a way to go to war with the British, but he would need to find a way to recruit more soldiers to fight with his mob. However, there is a problem. Up until this point, he has never had to work with any other mobs, so he has to find a way to form relationships with other mobs so that they will join his cause.
After spending many days struggling to find a way to recruit other soldiers, Taz finally came up with an idea. As the British soldiers left his village for another day of looting, Taz decided to follow the soldiers to the other villages. Taz will then hide in the woods, waiting for the British to leave the village. Once the British have left, Taz will then meet with the leaders of that village, trying to convince them to join his cause. After spending 2 weeks of talking to the other members of the mobs, he was able to recruit 3,000 soldiers for his army. It was time to fight.
That night, Taz and the other men of his army wait outside the village in the woods. Throughout the night, Taz goes door to door, quietly evacuating all of the men, women, and children preparing the village for the attack. House by house, families quietly escape into the woods and away from the battle that will ensue in the morning. There's one last family that remains, Anna and her husband Charlie.
Taz quietly knocks on Charlie and Anna's door. Charlie answers the door, furious that Taz woke him up so late in the night. Taz explains his plan to Charlie, and the two men get into a fierce argument as Anna assumes the role of peacemaker. Charlie charges Taz, tackles him to the ground, and begins to punch him in the face. The British soldiers rush out of their homes towards Charlie and Anna's house because of the commotion. The British soldiers break down the door, and one of the soldiers stabs Charlie in the back. Just as the soldier is about to stab Taz, Anna picks up a spear and stabs him in the throat. The remaining British soldiers rush out of the house, commanding their fellow soldiers to fight. When Taz's troops see the British soldiers fleeing out of Charlie's home towards their comrades, they rush into the town, hiding behind houses, waiting to attack the emerging British soldiers. Taz joins his men. This is his moment to shine.
The British soldiers pour out of their homes, rushing toward Charlie's home when they are met by waves of Taz's soldiers. The surprise attack by Taz's soldiers severely diminished the British troops, but many were able to flee, gearing up for another attack. After the fight, Taz found one British soldier injured, but alive in the battlefield. Taz walked over to this injured soldier and put the tip of his spear against his chest. Taz told the soldier that he must tell George to leave Tasmania, for he is the Tasmanian Devil, and he will kill every British soldier if he has to. The soldier agreed, and Taz let him survive and return to his fellow British troops.
And 2 weeks later.
Just as Taz's troops were beginning to think that maybe the British troops wouldn't return, red coats began to emerge from the woods, forming multiple lines of attack. All hell broke loose. Taz's troops were caught by surprise, outnumbered, and at an arms disadvantage. They suffered great amounts of loss. Just as his army is about to surrender to the British forces, more Aboriginal tribes, who had heard about Taz's courageous fight, emerged from the woods, attacking the British from behind. Their additional support helped save Taz's troops, allowing them to push the British back into the woods and away from future conflict. Before all the British soldiers retreated, Taz found George. While looking George straight in the eyes, Taz stabbed George straight through the chest, solidifying his position as the future leader of their mob and solidifying his name in history, the Tasmanian Devil.
The end.